This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 8, Episode 11. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network of podcasts brought to you by Mountain Man Medical. Today is Wednesday, April 26th, 2023, as of the recording of this episode. And I am thrilled to be with you here today. I'm your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined today by co-host and producer, Matthew Maruster.
And I'm thrilled to be here too, man.
Oh, we're just thrilled all around, aren't we? Well, we missed an episode last week due to some technical issues that we just could not get resolved before, we ran out of time and had other places and things we needed to be to and doing. So glad to be with you a week later with this episode. This is going to be a Justified Saves episode, which is what we refer to on this podcast that maybe is more commonly known as defensive gun uses, DGUs. So we've got a bunch of great DGU stories to share with you all today. Justified saves are defined as instances of use of justified deadly force in defense of people primarily. And in that context, the civilian context is the one that we're particularly interested in on this podcast. So we're glad to be with you. We were going to do this episode a week ago, but like I said, due to some technical issues, could not get it to work. But here we are today, and we are indeed thrilled. Today's episode is sponsored and brought to you by CCW Safe, as well as Guardian Nation, which we'll talk some more about that here in a little bit. But first things first, let's jump into our very first story here. Retired Baytown officer hospitalized after confronting intruder caught on camera barging into home. I want to throw it your way, Matthew. I know that you're familiar with this story, and why don't you tell us? This is kind of an interesting one out of Highlands, Texas, where we have a retired cop that got into a bit of a confrontation and a shootout after her home was burglarized. So that's kind of an interesting context there. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, so like you said, this happened in Highlands, Texas. The date on this is March 28th. So last month this happened. And basically what happens in the morning, this woman's away from her home, and a suspect kicks in the door of her home. She sees it on camera. She's not home. Sees this dude enter her home armed with a firearm. And apparently there's a security system that, emits some sort of loud siren or beeping noise. So they think that he might have left because of that. Doesn't go, through the house, but leaves. And as he leaves, he's walking through the neighborhood, and this 64-year-old retired police officers, the neighborhood guys say, like, the dude normally is just chilling outside on his porch, just enjoying life, being
It's
retired
actually
and
a
everything.
she.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, a she.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Sitting outside and sees this dude walking down the street, and just things, notices that this person is up to no good, and and gets in the vehicle, starts following him, and as the dude eventually finally figures out that this person's following him, and a confrontation ensues. They get into a physical fight, which turns into a gun battle. And this is witnessed by a guy who's just in the neighborhood driving by. He sees this fight going on before the shots are exchanged, sees the fight, knows this isn't just a normal, couple kids fighting. This seems, out of place. And he takes him around through the car, close to where he's sitting, gets out. Apparently the suspect in this case dropped their firearm. So he goes over this witness and grabs the firearm away, and they're able to get this guy into custody. In the meantime, the retired police officer actually suffers a injury to the ear and is bleeding. And this in the video, this guy, the witness says, he saw him bleeding and grabbed some paper towels from his car. So obviously some points in there that we can hit on, but kind of a weird story, and shows just how how freaked out this woman was just watching this video of somebody kicking into the back door, and how scary it was just for her to see, like, if somebody would have been home. And it's clear she didn't really have a plan, like a home security plan other than the security system. So that's another point that I'll kind of throw over to you to kind of flesh
Yeah.
out those things, but kind of a multifaceted lessons learned type thing here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're spot on there. This is quite it's a rather unique incident, where an individual that is involved later in this confrontation and ultimately shootout witnesses the crime taking place in their home virtually, much like many of us get. I mean, I have security cameras at home now, tied into the cloud, and you get a notification. I get them all the time. Somebody goes out my front door or comes up to my door, and hey, somebody's activated the front camera, or there's motion detected or whatever. And so this retired cop sees the burglary take place while they are away from home, while they're um, and I don't know all the specifics of, did they call 911 right away? Did they rush home to try to deal? I don't know what was going on, but either way, when they're driving through their neighborhood, they see the same suspect, the same individual. So they saw him on camera, and then they see him in the neighborhood, and they're like, "Oh, I know who this is. This is my suspect. This is the person that broke into my home a little bit ago." And so and I imagine they're on the phone talking with dispatch and trying to feed information, and they're following them in their vehicle. And then the altercation takes place, which presumably leads to the retired cop getting out of the vehicle, because it says it turns into confrontation, and then it escalates into a shootout. The bystander, there's a photo here in the news story of a bullet that struck the wheel well of their vehicle, not too far from the driver's side door. They're just a passerby, and they just happen to be in the wrong place, wrong time, or maybe the right place, right time, depending on how you want to look at it. Because this retired cop was in a bit of a pickle. Both the suspect, the burglar, was shot and wounded, as well as the retired cop was shot and wounded in the course of this confrontation. And this bystander, who also almost catches a bullet, uh, bravely exits their vehicle and goes over and helps this retired cop to bring an end to this altercation. This is an interesting one because I don't, it's always challenging getting involved in other people's problems, and we've talked about the challenges with that. You're a third party, and how do you know who is the innocent party in a particular situation? How do you read the situation? You go, that clearly is the bad guy here, and this is the good guy. Um, Now, we don't know what this person saw, or how it was presented to them visually exactly, but clearly they were able to figure it out, and so that's good on them. It's just something to think about, and it's a word of wisdom, if you will, to all of us, to know, like, hey, there's a time and place to get involved in things. That's something we all have to decide for ourselves, as far as what we're willing to do, how far we're willing to go. But if we're going to get involved in other people's problems, we better have a pretty good idea of what's going on, or we might find ourselves on the wrong side of the battle, and we might, and that both in terms of that literal physical battle, as well as a potential legal one that follows afterwards. So just some things to think about there. And then it's really great content here, where it mentions in the article, it says he was pouring blood. So, and it sounds like it's actually, some of this is not super clear how it's written, but we know, again, the suspect was shot. We know that the retired cop was shot, and I thought it was a female cop, because it does say that this person lives there and refers to her as a she. So there might be some mix up as far as the pronouns that are being used, whether I've misread it or whether the actual journalist is misrepresenting things here. I don't know. But it just says how he is pouring blood. And so I got in my truck. This is the bystander. What they did, they got into their truck, got paper towels, and gave it to him. There was so much blood. And so we know what we know here, regardless of pronouns or how people identify whether it got correct here in the article or not, is that we have a good guy and a bad guy involved in an incident. Both are wounded. Good guys wounded. We know frequently this is not uncommon, where good guys doing the right thing uh, are not going to walk away from the incident unscathed. And so this is one of the reasons why we do talk about the importance of having a backup plan in terms of some kind of secondary response. The first response is dealing with the violent threat. The second one is dealing with the aftermath, and that aftermath may often include injuries to yourself, injuries to third parties, injuries to your family, your loved ones, your spouse, your children, maybe a beloved pet in your household. It could be injuries to the bad guy that, for whatever reason, you feel in your heart of hearts that you've dealt with the threat, and now you're going to try to save their life. I know some people don't want to get involved in that, and that is also okay. But point is, the secondary response here, meaning the medical or trauma response side of it as well. You might not have time before ambulances can roll and can get there, and and medical professionals can get you the help that you need or a loved one needs. And so having some good training and education, and also the proper gear, not just the gun, but also the trauma gear that might be necessary in an incident like this. So with that in mind, we thought we would point you to the fact that two great video courses we have on our website, Complete Home Defense. Since this was a burglary, although it was a burglary that took place in a vacant home at the time, this is something, and even the retired cop mentioned how they could have been, what would have happened, how would this have gone down? Because obviously the burglar was armed. How might this have gone down had they been home? Now, it may have actually been more advantageous to the homeowner. I don't know, because they would have been in their element and not just out on the street somewhere like this one ended up taking place. But they, hey, Complete Home Defense, that's the name of our course. We spent a couple of days filming that a couple years ago now. It was a great time. Lots of great content about ways to put together, like you were just mentioning a minute ago, Matthew, about having a home defense plan and knowing how and the how you're going to go about actually defending your home, defending your family within that home. That's a super important thing. So check out our complete home defense course at concealedcarry.com. I think you can actually go to concealedcarry.com/CHD, I believe works. And if not, I'll make sure it works. CHD standing for Complete Home Defense. And then since we just got done talking about emergency trauma medicine, check out our, it's actually I think a very low cost, I think on concealedcarry.com website. I don't remember the exact price, but you can take the emergency trauma response video training course, which is a great primer, getting your feet wet in knowing how to deal with the aftermath, the secondary response of something like this violent altercation that took place. Or, frankly, you could just join Guardian Nation today, which is our monthly membership program. You could join and get access to not just these two great video courses, but all of our online video training content and a whole bunch of other online content and a whole bunch of discounts and a whole bunch of other great membership benefits as well. So you can learn more at guardiannation.com. Let's get now to our next story here, and this is titled, you actually wrote this article, Matthew, so I'll touch on a little bit, but I'll let you ultimately provide us some of your thoughts since you put this together. But the title is, I'm shooting anyone who trespasses on my property. This is a common thing that I see stated quite often on social media, and I think a lot of people say things, when they're hiding behind the anonymity of their keyboards and computer screens, that they probably wouldn't say to people's faces, or certainly say to a police officer. But you know I just was on, actually, as this, I'm reminded, Matthew, I just was on Nextdoor, the social media
Mm,
app, last night because I got pinged some kind of notification, and yeah, it was interesting enough because it was talking about a break-in into a vehicle. It actually wasn't in my neighborhood, but it was a neighboring neighborhood. And it'll notify you on some of those things as well, depending on how you have your notification set up. I like to know about that kind of stuff. I like to know about the stuff that happens in the surrounding neighborhoods because that's a warning call as well of, hey, this happened over 10 minutes away or 8 minutes away or whatever. It's a good heads up. And so I looked at this post, and they're talking about how at this one apartment complex in a part of town that they've tried to revitalize it over the last year. So there's the kind of this mix of, there's still some shady parts of town there, but there's some of the more upscale things that they're trying to bring into that part of town. And a bunch of car break-ins have been happening. And there's a gentleman that commented on there about, well, you know, this is getting out of hand, and next time it happens, well, I've got my firearm. And I'm like, oh, geez. So I commented, I'm like, hey, bro, at least this is the state of Colorado, and if you're using that firearm purely for trying to defend your vehicle that's being broken into, that's probably not going to fly very well in a court of law. Just a heads up, you might want to understand the law a little bit better. And he had never responded or anything. But a lot of times I have people come back, like, yeah, but somebody's got to stand up to these ruffians that are just running roughshod through our neighborhoods, and we got to stop letting them get away with this crap. Anyway,
mhm.
so that's kind of the attitude that sometimes we see, and kind of what you're touching on in this article here. But there's a story that's actually talking about, this has been hitting the social media quite a bit lately, in the mainstream media, this Ralph Yarl incident, where basically what we had happen was, this 18, he was 18 if I recall, 18-year-old or 16-year-old
16.
boy, Ralph Yarl, apparently was trying to go to a house to pick up his younger siblings. Uh, uh, and I can see how this would totally happen, because he's supposed to go to an address on Northeast 115th Terrace Street or whatever, and instead he went to a home at Northeast 115th Street. We have, here in the Denver metropolitan area of Colorado, houses that are on Smith Street and Smith Court and Smith Drive, sometimes back to back to back, street after street after street, basically all the same street name, just that little appendix, if you will, at the end of street or drive or avenue or whatever, and there will be 3 or 4 of them in a row. And people have showed up at my house, hey, I'm looking for address such and such, and I'm like, well, that's street, and we're over here on Court. So Ralph Yarl goes to the wrong address, the wrong home. It's I think it was at night, from what I recall. He's
Yeah,
knocking on
10
the
p.m.
door, or rings the doorbell. This 84-year-old man by the name of Andrew Lester goes to the door, sees this 16-year-old kid at the door, and he he just misreads the situation. He perceives this as being uh, a young man trying to get into his home through his front door, and so he shoots his revolver through the door, and strikes Ralph Yarl twice. And yeah, so this is a case of misidentified location on the part of this young boy. Not his fault, and that's certainly something that anybody can do and can make the mistake of. This certainly is a mistake of misreading what's going on, and also a mistake tactically of, he has not yet made entry into your home. He has not barged his way in. He has not broken in, and you're shooting through the door and striking him with bullets. So there is, unfortunately, Matthew, and I don't know if you looked into this, but this is in Missouri, okay, in the Kansas City area. In Missouri, there is a provision in their law, and the way it's written, the way it's worded, that this may be a justified shoot based on the way their law is written. So I'm going to be clear, because because we have to be realistic about stuff that, because there are a lot of people upset at this, at this Andrew Lester fella, because he shot this young kid mistakenly through the door. And that, that wasn't right. And it is a tragedy for sure. And in some states, this gentleman absolutely would likely be faced with charges. That may not happen here because of the fact that Missouri law is actually somewhat permissive, actually specifies in their law on the statutes that you may use deadly force. It's certainly against like an intruder, a burglar in your home, but also someone that you believe is attempting to break into your home. And so not all states specify it to that level. So something worthwhile understanding. But the more important part here for us as concealed carriers and as people interested in home defense is that we need to understand what tactically is smart and prudent and ethical. And even if the law says a certain thing, that doesn't necessarily mean that's how you should behave. I'm not trying to tell people how they should think either, but I am pointing out some things here. And for me personally, uh, I believe it's far better, from a tactical standpoint, to not shoot through doors. And we have another story a little bit later too that kind of does, is something similar, although it happens within the home. But tactically, that's rarely a very good choice.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, you summarize that really well, and you guys are probably familiar with the story. It's very, it's been very publicized. The guy, in this article I wrote, Riley, you hit it correctly. Like, I get frustrated when I hear people say those things, because whether they mean it or not, literally, right? Like, whether they literally mean they're going to shoot anybody who trespasses, or that's just something that they're saying out of frustration, I think it's a dangerous thing either way, because on the one hand, you're making statements that, truthfully, if you end up getting in a shooting, that similar to what you're describing in a post online, that very well could be used as some sort of, um, you know frame of mind. We saw that in the case with the one cop who got who or not the cop, the kid. He's a off duty, I think, reserve, Army Reserve. He shot somebody at a
Hmm.
at
Yep.
a Black Lives Matter protest, right? That
Yep.
came up to his car,
Yeah, that's the one
and
out of Texas. That's the name's slipping me as well. Anyway,
yeah,
yeah, no,
but
I know what
but
you're
but
talking about.
they pulled up the fact that he made comments about, you know, disliking the protests, and and
Yeah.
comments like, I might have to go shoot somebody and kill somebody at one of these things. Something similar to that. I'm not quoting it verbatim, but something along those lines. And so
Yep.
I'm not saying, I didn't study that case. I don't know, but what I'm saying is, if you make a statement and you're just kind of shooting off at the hip, that's not a good thing. That's not what you want to project, number one. And number two, if you're saying it just because you're frustrated, I think that this mindset leads us to make poor decisions. And I reference this case as far as, like, I think that, and I don't know this man's, you know, um, frame of mind or anything. I'm not saying that this is what he thought, but very often, if we think that, well, I have a gun and anybody who comes on my property, I'm going to deal with it. We don't put in the proper, fail safes or security that kind of prevents it from getting to that point. Like I'm going to put in a doorbell camera, so I don't even have to confront the person. I don't have to open the door and armed with a firearm to get in that predicament, right? Like I and
Yeah.
or I'm not trying to avoid it. It's almost like, well, bring it on. That door was for your safety, not for mine, or these types of mentality. And I just think that if we pause and think of, like that's not really where we want to be. I don't want to have to open the door
Yeah.
with the firearm in my hand and
Yep.
have like a fraction of a second to decide if this person's trying to break in or not.
Yep.
I want to have a layered security system so I don't have to even make that decision.
Yep.
And and I put in another story in that article, saying just a few days later, the a carload of 20-year-old people out in the rural area of New York turn down this driveway of
Yeah.
this rural house, wrong house. There's not a lot of cell reception. They get lost. They go to turn around, and a dude, they don't even get out of the car. They're just turning around this guy's driveway. Dude comes out on his porch and fires uh, several rounds into this car, and kills a 20-year-old girl in the vehicle.
Yep.
And it's crazy.
Yep.
And so, like, I just think that,
Something
like,
similar happened in southeastern Idaho like a year or so ago. I think.
we covered that.
Yep. Yep.
And I think I
Very,
linked
very,
to.
very similar. Wrong place, wrong turn, wrong road. And
Yep.
dude just starts firing because they're trespassing on his property.
Yep. And so, I even in that article I linked, if you guys go to the show notes and you want to see those two stories, and I linked to three others, including the one that we covered in the podcast a few a year ago or so. But, like, it's not unheard of that people go way above and beyond on trespassing. And I get it, like, it's your property, you want to be safe, and all these things, but you can be much safer if you have a layered security system, and then that gives you time to be, to have some discernment as to, what is this? Is this a kid
Mhm.
that's coming to the wrong house to pick up his younger brother, or is this somebody
Yep.
who's trying to break in the door to kill me? And
Yep.
I
Yep.
just think that that's the wise play,
Absolutely.
whether or not you're legally justified in doing it or not. Like, the wise play is to not be involved in it,
Yep.
and that's kind of like, the heart behind writing this
Yeah.
article. They got
The
banned on Facebook, by the way, because
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
title.
yeah, that's right, your article, yeah. So, smart decisions happen, um, more likely when we have good plans, ahead of time in place, when we know how we're gonna handle situations like this that are similar to this before they actually happen. Chuck, by the way, on Facebook has a great comment, "Don't open the door just because someone knocks doesn't mean you have to answer. You don't wanna buy it. You don't know where their dog is. You can call 911 for them behind a locked door, etcetera, etcetera. You already have a church. All of your acquaintances have your number. No need for a surprise knock from a friend, but bad guys like to use the knock at the door to gain unauthorized entry." So, even to that point, like if someone knocks on my door, I want to know who's there. Um, like I can ignore it, right? But I want to know who's there. And so, like, you got a peephole, you got an exterior camera. You maybe have another window that you can take a peek out, so you can see who's on your front step, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't have a vantage point where you can see that, then install the things that you need to, so that you can gather information about who is on your doorstep. That's really, really relevant information. Um, so, that's part of having a plan. Like, if somebody comes to my house that I don't am I not that I'm not expecting, how do I handle that? It's You can't handle it if you don't very well, if you don't know who's there to begin with. And so, like, we just had a police officer come to our house last week because and actually they were just going through the neighborhood and letting people know that they were, because I live not too far from actually live very close to a school, and specifically a high school, and the students are uh, they're supposed to park in their permitted parking lot, and we sometimes have parking issues with students parking in the neighborhood and things of that nature. And he was going through just trying to figure out whose vehicles are whose and who's authorized to park where, kind of thing. And something as simple as that, like, you hear an unauthorized knock during the middle of the day, you're like, who is that? I I don't want to meet the police officer at my door with my gun in my hand, because we've read of stories like that, and kind of how the way they go, and they don't sometimes go very well. And so, hey, what I can do? Hey, front camera. Oh, okay. I have a cop at my door. Now I know a little bit better how to handle that situation. Or I could peek through the peephole. I got a peephole too. Oh, police officer. Okay. Yeah, maybe they're a bad guy that's dressed as a cop. Okay, well, have a plan for that too. Okay, so the point is to have a plan ahead of time. By the way, I have an update on this story on the Jarl case, Matthew, because I decided I better Google it, since it was a week or so ago since we last
Mhm.
attempted to do this podcast episode. It turns out 6 days ago, actually, Andrew Lester was charged in the shooting. Now, some more information has come out, and it sounds like, so the first shot that was fired struck Jarl in the head. and he fell to the ground. It appears that Lester then shot him again on the ground. So I don't know if it has to do with that, but that definitely doesn't sound very good. Okay, so even if there was a case to be made under Missouri law that he was justified because he had this kid at the front door pulling on his handle of the door, et cetera, and he shoots the kid, through the door once, and that's acceptable. Well, certainly the second shot may not have been acceptable, right? But they're also suggesting there was some racial bias in this case as well. I'm not going to get into that. In fact, I didn't even mention it because we try to leave that kind of stuff out of these types of analyses that we do on these stories. But it was a black young boy and a white guy and a white old man, and so could there have been something there? I don't know, but that's not for us to get into. But we're talking about the legal aspect, the tactical aspect, what's the smart thing to do as homeowners, as concealed carriers. So there you go. But a little update in the case that I thought we better mention since we do have that information available now.
Mm-hmm.
And we better move on as we've got still a lot to talk about. Man disarmed and shot with own handgun in parking lot. This happened in Dekalb County, Georgia, around 9 a.m. Gentleman, just about doing his day-to-day work, goes into this Dunkin' Donuts store. The suspect noticed the victim. By the way, the victim's name is Brian Dykes. He noticed the victim, Brian Dykes, carrying a firearm on his waistline. The suspect grabbed the gun from Dykes' pants. The suspect ran out of the store and Dykes chased after him. Dykes caught the suspect outside the store in the parking lot, and the two men wrestled over control of the gun. According to news reports, the suspect then shot Dykes with his own gun and fled to a nearby hotel where he was staying. 17-year-old suspect was the age of the suspect. So that's pretty much the facts of the case. Certainly I'd love to hear your analysis too, Matthew. But we've talked about these kinds of things. We've had some other similar stories that have come up over the years. We actually have two of them. I actually appended to this one. In fact, I'll just touch on it real quick because it's we don't have to cover them as totally separate stories. I just added it because it was relevant and somewhat was related. Two arrested for murder at Jonesboro store after stealing gun from victim. This happened in Jonesboro, I think that's Arkansas. I think that's where it is. Anyway, actually says here that Shannon Watkins, a 37-year-old male, had entered into a store to purchase a drink. It was just a gas station. He had a holstered weapon on his hip. Now, in the Dykes case, in the Georgia one, it doesn't specify, where he was carrying, how he was carrying. It says it grabbed the gun from his pants. But I mean, that could mean a lot of things. In this case, it seems a little bit more apparent that this person, Shannon Watkins, was carrying on their hip. While waiting in line, a male suspect entered the store and stood behind Watkins. The suspect then grabbed the gun from Watkins' hip and ran out of the store. By the way, these two incidents happened like weeks apart, just to, paint a picture here. So it's not like we've gone through and cherry picked, and found these, random stories of open carriers or concealed carriers not being careful enough. This just came up in the news feed all within a couple of days or weeks of each other. So in this case, Watkins chased after them again after the suspect, just like the Dykes case. A struggle ensued and multiple shots were fired at Watkins. And in fact, as he attempted to flee, so he realizes now, oh crap, I'm in a fight and I'm getting shot. A second subject exited a vehicle and also began firing at him. So he ended up in a real bad way. In both of these instances, both the good guys passed away from their injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty sad, pretty tragic.
Yeah. And you hit it. And obviously, chasing after somebody after they stole your gun is probably not the best idea. And I think sometimes we can get caught up on like, was the guy open? Like if he was open carrying, then concealed carry, pro concealed carrier is like, oh, see, open carry is not good. And then if it was concealed but not concealed well, they'll say, well, concealed carry isn't good either because it happens to concealed carriers. The point is if you're properly concealing the gun, they're not going to see it. That's the point. Like, so so poor concealed carry is no different, essentially, practically, than open carry, because the point is if it's seen, it doesn't matter if you intended it to be seen or not. It's seen, so it's not concealed. And
Yep.
so,
Well, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you just real quick because this is it's actually the definition by I believe by case law in Colorado. How concealed is defined by law is um, concealed so as not to be readily apparent by ordinary observation. That's like the definition of concealment in Colorado. So it's not readily apparent by ordinary observation. I like to mention that because it's a good way of thinking of it. Because basically, by law in Colorado, if somebody can tell you you have it, even though it's like covered by garments, a jacket, a shirt, whatever, if they can still tell that you got it because it's not concealed well enough, then it becomes by law the exact same as though it was carried openly. And where that becomes relevant is we do have certain jurisdictions in Colorado where concealed carry exists everywhere in the state of Colorado, but there are certain jurisdictions where open carry is not permitted, and that's where the legal part becomes relevant. Because if I'm in, for instance, in the city and county of Denver, open carry is not permissible, and so by the legal definition, even if I am concealed, but somebody can still, by ordinary observation, determine that I have a gun that they can that it's readily apparent, then it is, in fact, by law, open carry, and I'm in violation of Denver's open carry statute. So sorry, a little bit of a sidebar there, but
yeah,
it's just a good way of thinking about it. If somebody can tell you you have the gun, then it's the same thing as if you were actually just carrying it openly on an OWB fully exposed holster because they know you have it, and you're at a disadvantage as far as um, that they know you have it, and they then can take it from you. It's hard for people to take things from you they don't know you have. And the gun takeaways we see most commonly, it can happen in a variety of ways. But these two instances are both instances where people are patrons at a business, and the suspect ends up coming into that same business and is basically in line or in queue behind them and observes, hey, he's got a gun, and they are behind you. And while we say, well, situational awareness, this was a situational awareness failure, guess what? You cannot be 360 degrees all the time, 100% of the time. And at some point, you got to approach the counter, give your order, pay your money, be distracted by the keypad as you're trying to enter in a pin or sign your name or hit little buttons, as you're trying to pay for your meal. And it only takes a split second for them to lift a shirt and grab the gun, or just grab it off your waist and go. There's a famous video that comes to mind. I've seen it. I say famous because I've seen it in a number of places that happened in a McDonald's. It was exact same story, exact same setup, where the takeaway happens from behind in a moment of distraction, and gun is taken and gun is gone.
mhm. Yeah, it happens quick, and I would even say, if you're concealed carrying, but it's poor concealed carry, you might be at a even more at a bigger disadvantage, because you may think that the person doesn't know, and therefore you're not as keen as to somebody eyeballing you. Or if you're purposely open carrying, you may think, okay, well, I'll have a holster with some sort of retention. But if you're carrying like IWB concealed carry, and it's just poorly concealed, you're carrying small on your back or something, you're probably not carrying like a level 2 duty holster tucked behind your back, right? It's probably just slipped into a Kydex holster or leather holster, and so there's no retention. So
Yeah.
I,
Let's be
I
real though. Let's be real though. Out of those that I have observed practicing open carry that aren't cops, how many of them are actually using a proper retention holster?
probably zero. I mean,
I
it's
won't say
hard to
zero because
say.
I've seen a few, but it is
Mhm.
very common that it is just a basic level
Exactly.
holster,
Yeah.
that there's zero there's nothing keeping someone, like I because I have the same thought every time I see that. I go, this person's not being very aware right now, and I have
Mhm.
the advantage, and if I wanted to lift that gun out of their holster, it's mine right now, right here. There wouldn't be a thing that they could do. And that I mention that because it's something that I observe, and I fear for people like that because I'm not saying that's what happened here with Dykes or what happened with Watkins. In these two instances, we just don't know enough about those. I'm not trying to victim blame here or anything like that, but I fear for people that do carry openly, because I'm all about supporting the right of that. Okay, it's just not my personal choice from a tactical point of view. And that if you do choose to practice your right of open carry, which hey, more power to you, then maybe you should give a little bit of thought about how you're going about doing that, so that you can prevent from ending up like one of these guys. Now, here's the problem with these two stories. People will naturally look at them and go, well, these two gentlemen chased after the thieves, and that's what got them killed. Okay, fair. And so you think, oh, I just won't chase after them. Like they got my gun. Well, guess what? That's still a problem. They stole your gun, bro. It's still a problem that they got your gun. Maybe you live to tell the tale, but that gun is going to be out in the street and it will be used in some other crime, and somebody else may end up dead because you allowed somebody to take your gun. So anyway, something to think about. Dad shoots at roommate found in daughter's bed. Matthew, why don't you tell us about this one out of Florida? Of course, it's Florida man. No, it's
Yeah, this
Cape Coral, Florida is where this one took place. What happened?
yeah, this happened last month. This is from our what not to do. This is not advised.
Yep.
So this dude, he was arrested for 3 felony charges. So basically, what happens is this dude is renting out a room in his home to a man and a woman. I don't know if they're boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. I don't know. They're in some sort of relationship. He also has a teenage daughter who lives in the home with him. So the father of this teenager and his rentees are getting hammered, drinking alcohol, get hammered, and
it specifically says in the article they were drinking alcohol in excess.
In excess. So the teenage daughter is not partaking in this and is in her bed sleeping. Apparently, the roommates are gonna call it quits for the night. They go to their room, but the male roommate goes to the bathroom and then goes to the restroom. Then he comes out of the restroom. Apparently, thinks the girl's bedroom is his, gets naked and lays in the bed next to her. Now, there's no indication that he was doing anything inappropriate, but he just passes out next to this woman or next to this teenager. She comes out. The daughter wakes up and is like, "This is kind of weird." Goes and tells her dad. While this is happening, the female roommate realizes what's going on and goes in there and grabs the guy, wakes him up, and hey, get in your bed. Goes into their room and closes the door. Now the father goes berserk and tries to get into the room, pounding on the door. They're not answering, so he decides he's going to start shooting through the door at whoever might happen to be on the other side. Nobody's injured. Police are called. This dude's arrested, and kind of when I wrote this article and posted on Facebook, of course, we got some, comments like, oh, I do the same thing and this and that. And it's like, I get the idea that you don't want some, drunk dude sleeping. I'm not condoning that in any way, shape, or form. I'm also not condoning getting so hammered that with these people that, that you subject your daughter to that type of thing. And I mean, he's clearly not making great decisions because there's no threat that even if he were to find him in the act, that might be different, but now there is no immediacy to using deadly force against this guy to stop an assault against his daughter. And so appropriately he was charged. Now I don't know what's going to happen. The guy might drop charges or whatever, but this is not what you want. This is not the predicament you want to be get yourself into.
Yeah, and I agree with your assessment, and I mean, at the very least, you have a female roommate here that's not even party, she's not a part of any supposed sexual assault against the man's teenage daughter, And so just by that alone, if the man's firing through the door, that he's threatening the life and using deadly force against a complete innocent party to all of this. Um, but yeah, you're spot on with that. I mean, this is why we advise, caution. If you consume alcohol, please be smart about how you do that. And this is true if you drink and also drive a vehicle. Like, you need to understand and have rules in place that prevent you from breaking the law and killing people at the wheel. You need to be smart about what you do with respect to firearms if you are also under the influence. And so here there were some very bad decisions made, presumably a bad mistake on the part of one gentleman that was too inebriated to know where he was, and that's problematic too. Um, but perhaps a relatively honest mistake. But then some bad decisions, were made by this teenage girl's father, and yeah, that's unfortunate. So yes, definitely in the what not to do category. In fact, I should say that the last couple stories we covered here, technically, we have in our notes as being labeled as what not to do's. And so, with that in mind, what's one thing that you should do is make sure you consider making sure you have coverage, legal coverage, for the event that you might need to use it. If you are ever involved in some kind of deadly force incident, then I strongly recommend that you are covered by CCW Safe. CCWSafe.com is their website. They've been a sponsor of the podcast now for quite some time. We're thankful for that sponsorship and relationship. And we're also thankful we have a discount code available to podcast listeners only. By the way, we're not publishing this discount code in written form anymore because there's been some abuse of it. If you are a listener of the podcast, and we'd ask that you be careful with sharing it too, but if you're a listener of the podcast, you may use the code CC Podcast to save 10% off of CCW Safe membership today. CCW Safe is also very passionate about making sure their members are well educated and knowledgeable about the proper use of force from a legal standpoint. They obviously don't want to have to represent you or hire attorneys to represent you in the event you're involved in some kind of deadly force use incident. Um, so they have a lot of great information and resources available on their website at ccwsafe.com for members and non-members alike. Lots of great information on their blog, a podcast of their own with use of force experts and legal experts. So please consider joining CCW Safe today. Again, ccwsafe.com. You can take a look at their ultimate plan, their defender plan, as well as if you're a LEO or military, I think both active and or retired, they also have a protector plan. And so you can check those plans out today. Save 10% by using the discount code CC Podcast. And by the way, we mentioned earlier in the episode, our other podcast sponsor today is Guardian Nation. And if you are a Guardian Nation member, one of the great discounts you get is not only a 10% discount off CCW Safe membership, but you actually get 20% off. And to my knowledge, there's not anywhere else you can get that big a discount off of CCW Safe except through the Guardian Nation membership. So please consider joining CCW Safe today, ccwsafe.com. And we appreciate their sponsorship of the podcast. Let's get now to our next story here. Yeah, Nathan, I see your comment now. Sorry, I didn't see it earlier on Facebook. Shooting through doors again. Yeah, it was the one I referenced earlier that we would have another story where somebody shot through doors. Out of Philadelphia, man shoots would-be car thief during gun battle, police say. That's the headline. We have an 18-year-old suspect was shot 4 times throughout his body, it says, and collapsed to the ground after trying to flee. This according to investigators out of Northeast Philadelphia. This started as an attempted theft of a vehicle, and the 18-year-old and a second suspect. It seems more commonly now than not, Matthew, that so many of these types of incidents, there are multiple bad guys,
Mm-hmm.
like period. Like that's just the norm now. I would say if you find yourself in an incident like this, like assume, like we've said this for a long time, but it's just not. It seems like it's more common that there's 2, 3, 4 suspects involved in these kinds of situations. But these two males were trying to steal a Toyota sedan or it was around 3:30 p.m. on a Thursday. It says they went inside the car when the vehicle's owner, a 26-year-old man, heard the commotion and exited his home. The 26-year-old man was armed with a gun. Police said the 18-year-old man, who was also armed, exited the vehicle, and the two men then got into a shootout. Police haven't determined who shot first, but that's actually not entirely. I mean, like, that's relevant information, but it actually doesn't necessarily mean that the good guy here using, firing first is a bad thing or not. If he witnessed uh, uh, the the teen here exiting the vehicle with gun in hand, that's probably justification enough, right? So anyway, it says at least 13 shots fired between the two men, and the 18-year-old was shot 4 times. He tried to flee on foot and collapsed to the ground about a block away. The 26-year-old man was not injured. Good on him. He got the job done and did not get injured. He's very fortunate, it sounds like, by the fact that 13 shots were fired. Says a stray bullet went also into the kitchen of a nearby home, but no one inside was injured. That's very fortunate. They have not determined who fired that shot. The second suspect, who was still inside the Toyota that they were trying to steal, did manage to drive off during the shootout, but crashed into a wall. So here's what's unfortunate about this kind of thing. Oh, by the way, it does mention that the 26-year-old man does have a valid permit to carry. Not that that would have been relevant either in this particular case, but to say that he has one, that he's cooperating with police and with the investigation. It does not say whether he will face any charges. I would say that probably sounds unlikely based on how I read the facts, but we don't necessarily have all the facts. But that's what we read here. But the sad and ironic part here is that man hears commotion outside of car about to be stolen. So he goes out to investigate and perhaps try to prevent this from taking place, but ends up in a shootout, which is very bad. Okay. Because no one wants to be in a shootout. And he could have been he could have been injured or killed himself just by the nature of getting into a shootout, and then his car still gets stolen anyway and gets crashed. So it's kind of like it's a lose lose lose, in terms of, like, at the end of the day, this guy had a bad day, and that's unfortunate and somewhat terribly ironic. We want to be super careful about in, involving ourselves in the prevention of theft. Uh, like, I understand and relate to and identify with this desire to not allow crime to take place and trying to, keep our community safe, and that if criminals get away with stuff, it's just going to encourage them to get away with more stuff, from a crime perspective. And so I understand, and we should have, community watch programs and things like that in place. And so, like, I get, like, this is as far as, like, investigating that there's something going on, I need to check it out. And like, I don't want to necessarily ignore that. But we do want to give thought about how we go about doing that, and that we want to be careful, we want to be smart, we want to be prudent, we want to use good tactics. But what ultimately is a theft of property here, which sucks, but hey, at least you don't get hurt in the course of that physically, but then turns into a gunfight where now your life could be, taken from you in an instant. That's where it's like, my life is not worth a car. That's I absolutely 100% feel that way.
Mm.
But these sorts of things are difficult because at the same time, um, and at the very least, you may just, hey, I hear noise. Like, what is that? I'm going to check it out. It could be raccoons getting in my garbage again. Like, so yeah. What's
Yeah.
your thoughts on this one, Matthew?
No, I agree with you, and there's a lot of people that and I agree. Like, we shouldn't be turn a blind eye to all crime. We shouldn't allow people, the vulnerable, to be harmed and taken advantage of. I'm all for that. I'm just thinking, like, okay, so I want to take a stand against car burglaries or car thefts. And so I'm going to take a stand, and that's my property, and I'm going to go out with a firearm, knowing, because I'm bringing a firearm because I know it's a potentially dangerous situation. I'm not going out there unarmed because, right, I'm carrying a firearm because I know it's potentially dangerous. Guy comes out, starts shooting, we get in a gun battle, and this round that either he fires or the other person fires, strikes a kid sitting on their kitchen table, and kills them. And so now, not only you've protected your property, you've told those criminals they're not going to get away with this. You killed one crashed and ran away. Your car's totaled. You got to make an insurance claim anyways. You're not getting your car. Now you have to turn in your firearm, whatever investigation, however long that takes. You killed an innocent person. Maybe you didn't personally, maybe they did, maybe they don't even run the ballistics and you don't even know who did it. But it doesn't really matter, because that's not this. Like, now you're in this situation, and I guarantee you, like, I don't know how many listeners have had to use deadly force against somebody, but I'm just saying, like, it's not like, a lot of people think this is going to be some movie like thing where, it's just like, you're going to have to, the trauma of just going through a shooting or an assault or being a victim of violent crime is not, it doesn't make you feel, it puts you on edge. It might not make maybe now your wife or your girlfriend or your kids are scared because, oh, daddy went outside and he got shot at and he got beat up, and now they're scared to go outside. So I'm just saying, like, I get it, but like you were saying, like, it has to be, you got to do it wisely and weigh all the options. And is this the best way to take a stand against crime, to go out there with a gun for people that are breaking into my car? I don't know. Maybe you balance the scales and you say, this is the one I'm going on. And just pray that, somebody doesn't necessarily lose their life. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me the big takeaway here is to have the right attitude and a sound understanding of the law for your particular
sure.
jurisdiction.
Yeah.
The attitude that concerns me, and I'm not saying that's what this was in this particular story, but I'm referencing now. Remember, I talked earlier about the next door post where a gentleman, talking about a similar thing. Hey, we've had a lot of break-ins in the cars lately in our particular neighborhood. And, next time it happens, well, I've got my gun. It's like that's not the right attitude to have. You know, to be proudly proclaiming that hey, we're talking car, yeah, not even necessarily car thefts. They're just talking about break-ins, just people taking stuff from cars, and that we're going to combat that, but with deadly force. That's the wrong attitude, and frankly, is against the law in pretty much every jurisdiction that I'm aware of. So that's what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
So have the right attitude and a sound understanding of the law, and then have a solid plan about how you're going to handle such situations. And we share these stories, by the way, because it hopefully gives us all opportunities to consider things that maybe we hadn't considered before. Just hearing, and hey, this is the way this particular incident went down in such and such happenstance. That happen to me where I am? Yeah, I guess it could. I never really thought about it going down like that before. Well, what does that make me consider? Well, maybe I might approach that a little bit differently than what I had previously thought. And so that's why we do these things. That's why we have the Justified Saves episodes to begin with. And then the final thing I'll say about this is we are aware of the errant shot, whether that was from the bad guy or the good guy. We just don't know yet. May not know. But that is deeply concerning. That the bullet went somewhere and somebody could have been seriously hurt, injured, or killed from that. And I got to look at that from my perspective, that I, as the good guy, if I am called upon and have to use my firearm in defense, by golly, I need to have full accountability for every round that I fire. So,
Uh-huh.
okay, a couple more here. Let's see. We've got disabled vet turns tables on attacker in Houston, Texas metro station. Matthew, you actually wrote some coverage on this one on texas.concealedcarry.com. So tell us about this physically disabled person, former military veteran, and he uses a firearm in self-defense. Like, good for him.
Yeah, this is a quick one, pretty cut and dry. This guy's waiting at a metro station in Texas, 8:45 p.m. He's a disabled vet in a wheelchair. A guy comes up to him, grabs a bag from him, starts pulling it from him. He's struggling over it, and this veteran pulls out a firearm and shoots the guy. Guy runs away, and they transport this dude. He's going to make it. He's going to survive. The suspect, but yeah, it's just one of those cut and dry things where and I think the reason why I wrote this is, most of us probably listening look at, disabled person in a wheelchair, an elderly person, something like that, and we look at that ways to help people like that. If you can help somebody, they drop something, pick it up, get something off a shelf, whatever, you're out and about. But criminals don't always think that way, and oftentimes they're looking at these people as as targets because they presume that they're not able to defend themselves. And somebody might say, well, the guy was just trying to pull a bag from this guy. If it were me, I probably wouldn't have shot him. Well, and I'm not analyzing this case, legally, but you have to understand, people in a wheelchair or disabled people, they don't have the mobility. They might not have the ability to fight off an attacker or whatnot. And so we're talking about, we don't want to we want to not to give crime a foothold in our neighborhoods and things. And I think helping people like this, and just looking out for people that are more vulnerable, that helps big time. And if you are disabled, you're in a wheelchair or something, doesn't mean that you have to forfeit your ability to defend yourself. So
Yeah.
kind of
Yep.
a good story there.
100%. Yeah. I got nothing to add to that. But one cool thing here about this story is there is an actual image. I mean, we don't very often see photos of the good guys and good gals involved in these kinds of incidents, but here is one of this gentleman who is in not just a wheelchair, but an electric wheelchair. Like he's got to push the little knob, just to drive himself around. Truly, someone that would be considered a disabled individual. And I'm glad that we as Americans, frankly, have the right to defend ourselves and have the right to carry a firearm, for our personal defense and protection, because in a lot of places of the world, that's not the case. And this person would be completely vulnerable in many other, places throughout the world. Yeah, it's awesome. We have the Second Amendment. This is America. And kudos to this disabled veteran for being able to defend himself and taking the initiative to do so. A Chase Bank in also Houston. This was in Houston, just like the last story. Just this like a week or so ago, maybe a little more than a week. Robbery suspect who was shot by witness at a Chase ATM was wanted for murder. Houston PD says. So this started out as basically the classic situation where someone's approaching an ATM to use it to withdraw some money. They don't happen to see a bad guy that's in the area. Bad guy comes around a corner, it says here, approaches the person using the ATM and asks them or orders them to hand over money. The victim, it says, according to detectives, reportedly began to comply, but the suspect began to pistol whip the victim. So we have compliance, and this is why it's important. Like, even if compliance occurs, we have to still be prepared for going to that next level of personal defense, because it doesn't, and that's why I said, earlier, like, just because, like with the gun takeaway thing, just because they get the gun away and you're like, I'm not going to chase them, it doesn't mean you're not in jeopardy, right? Because they may just choose to shoot you anyway. But here it says that the victim begins getting pistol whipped, and a person driving by saw the crime happening, pulled out a gun to defend the victim. The man shot the suspect in the leg and foot. After several shots were fired, it says. The suspect was taken to the hospital in stable condition. Neither the victim nor passerby were harmed, which is curious. And maybe they just mean they weren't harmed as far as like getting shot or whatever, because it did say that that the victim was being pistol whipped. So, but anyway, also interestingly enough, here it says, according to ABC 13's safety tractor, and the zip code where this incident happened in Houston, 77042. I'll have to look where that is because I actually was in Houston not that long ago. There have been at least 103 robberies in the area in the last year. Wow. Uh,
Mhm.
Wherever that is, you may want to reconsider not being there or going there. So, yeah, another interesting incident here where we have a good Samaritan choosing to intervene in a third party's, you know, problem. And now this one might be a little bit more easy to read as I understand, what I'm reading in the news story here. You ATM, person withdrawing money, person getting pistol whipped by a guy, like that might paint a pretty good picture. But that's a really brave thing to choose to stop your vehicle, get out, draw your gun, and defend someone you don't even know. And yeah, it says they're being pistol whipped, so it's very apparent that the suspect here has a gun, so they could definitely use that against you. So it's a very brave thing to do. It's curious that it mentions that the suspect was shot in the leg and foot. I'd be curious if that was by choice or happenstance, based on whether there was good marksmanship being employed here or less than good marksmanship. Something to think about. What are your skills up to snuff? Can you make any shot that's required of you? And if not, why not? And if not, what do you need to do to make sure that your marksmanship skills are up to snuff? Some good things to consider there. So anyway, there you go,
Yeah.
Matthew.
Yeah. Don't go to ATMs at night if you don't have to, and don't go in 77042 zip
Yeah,
code, or check the crime. I mean, I don't know. I don't mean to like make light of it, but just, if you don't have to go at night and get cash, don't. It's it's not safe. It's not good
yeah,
if you
yep.
can avoid it.
A- Absolutely. That you're spot on with that. Like if you can avoid it, like yeah, because things happen, and that is just a known um, target. So, we want to reduce our risk. So something to think about. Final story, Matthew. I'll let you tell us about this one. Las Vegas is where this one took place, where an armed bystander helps mall security with knife wielding man.
Yeah, this is a pretty good one. So Las Vegas, it's the fashion show mall. So police responding to a call at this mall, man threatening store employees with a knife. Apparently, this is a large. They describe it as a large butcher knife. This dude starts waving the knife at at people at this mall. Then security officers at the mall get involved. They're unarmed security officers at the mall. He's threatening people, saying he's going to kill them. It lunges at report says he lunged at the security officers. Well, thankfully, a dude who is there is legally concealed carrying a firearm. Points it at the dude, tells him to get on the ground or whatnot. It doesn't really explain how, but it says after drawing the firearm, it gave the security officers opportunity to disarm him, place him in restraint. So not exactly sure how that worked, but yeah. So they take him into custody. No, nobody's cut, nobody's harmed, nobody's shot. This is one of those times where a firearm isn't shot, but it's used. It's brought into the mix to stop a potential crime, and this is one of those crimes that good guy doesn't with the gun doesn't never intervenes to stop anybody, that are only used negatively and all this stuff, and so this is one of those that doesn't make the radar, doesn't make any counts, but it's one of the times a firearm is used in a defensive purpose to potentially save lives. So good deal on this one.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of bandied about as a common phrase that's probably overused, and uh, it's a oversimplification of so many things. But the old adage of what does it take to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, or I guess could be stopping in this case a bad guy with a knife. There's just an irony here that exists. That you have multiple security officers involved in this shopping center, and um, and apparently they're not able to get the job done, and it takes a complete bystander, good Samaritan, concealed carrier to be like, hey, what's the problem here, guys? Like, I mean, yeah, I'm making a little bit light of it here too, but it's just, I mean, it's just so interesting because we have so many people on the other side of the gun issue that want to take them. I mean, it's like Washington State, my goodness, that just passed this next level. I mean, it's been what, like 3 years in a row now they've passed some kind of legislation in the state of pretty significance, um, restricting gun rights. And I mean, there's people who want to take guns away from us. There's people that insist that no, we don't need guns in the hands of law-abiding citizens. Like, are you insane? Like, but yet here's an example of one of those law-abiding citizens putting a stop to a deadly situation in a situation with security guards that apparently didn't have. I mean, I presume these were unarmed security officers, or why would they not have drawn a firearm, right? I mean, we are talking about a deadly threat here, a knife. Anyway, I don't know. We don't know all the answers there or all the facts, the circumstances here, but good on this person for stepping in and, frankly, without firing a shot. And that's the thing too, is how, like, we do share a lot of instances where shots are fired, but how many incidences are stopped or put an end to without shots fired? And that happens actually probably way more often than is even reported. And so, is there a value to armed citizens in society? Absolutely, 100%. You guys know it. We know it. Preaching to the choir, I'm sure, but it's good to be reminded of these things and to be able to hopefully articulate to, because maybe you're involved in conversations with friends, family, coworkers, or maybe even involved in your community or testifying before your state legislature about, hey, there's value to having a free society that values the Second Amendment, that believes in an armed citizenry, that because the fact is, we know that the criminals are armed regardless or not. So yeah, it's good to know and hopefully be able to articulate these arguments well. So that brings us to a conclusion of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed today's Justified Saves episode. Reminder of our sponsors of today's episode, which are, again, Guardian Nation, which you can learn more and get signed up today at guardiannation.com. Just a reminder that gives you immediate access to hundreds of hours of online video content, legitimate training content. And I say hundreds of hours because there's a ton of there's basically one-on-one interviews with industry professionals on a variety of topics, and that's not including the other great training content on a variety of topics of home defense, vehicle defense, trauma medicine, which we talked about earlier already. There's law stuff, or, legal courses. There's stuff about proper use of cover, fighting from cover, shooting from unconventional positions, concealment, holsters, all of that. Lots of great content available at guardiannation.com. Get signed up today. And then our other sponsor, ccwsafe.com, and we appreciate their sponsorship as well. And so with that, brings us to a conclusion. Matthew, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to you to the listeners once again. Very humbled and grateful for you guys. Leave comments and listen and encouragement, and we're just happy that you find the material or the podcast helpful, and we're appreciative of you guys.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Appreciate listeners and viewers. And guys, if you have anything for us, feedback, questions, comments, suggestions, etc., you can always reach us at podcast@concealedcarry.com. And we do appreciate it when you do reach out. We have hundreds and hundreds of emails from listeners over the years. So thank you so much. So with that, a reminder until next time to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.